Welcome to Econ Lessons. In this video, I'm going to talk about three ideas which right now have created a crack in the economy. And this crack, not only that, this crack probably cannot be fixed, and it's relevant for your lifetime. And these are long-term cracks. I do have one solution, and we can look at that. But first, let's take a look at the three cracks. The first one is the Fed funds rate. This is St. Louis Federal Reserve data. I like to always look at data from the actual Federal Reserve. I'm not distorting anything. You can fact check it. And it's simply a graph. It shows when interest rates are low and then they go to high, we usually have a recession. And it's pretty well correlated. If you were to run a regression on this and do some more analysis, you would find a correlation, but I don't think anybody is going to dispute this. When rates go from low to high, people find trouble borrowing, and entrepreneurs start switching and being more conservative. People start spending less for various reasons, and we start to go into a recession. So why is that? It's very simple. The interest rate is basically the cost of borrowing. When the cost of borrowing, whether it's your credit card, or entrepreneurs taking a loan from the bank or taking a mortgage, individual home, then it becomes more difficult. It becomes more challenging on a monthly basis when people try to meet these monthly payments. So these are the brakes for the economy. If you look at the graph, my goodness, we've been at historic lows. I've never seen it in my lifetime. I don't think it's ever been this low for this long. So the Federal Reserve has pushed the accelerator all the way down. And if we start to take our foot off the accelerator, of course, the economy is going to slow down. And you can see we're already edging up a little bit. Now, where this goes in the future, of course, nobody knows. But if we take a statistical correlation, there's a pretty good probability that the economy might have some inertia behind it because these interest rates are creeping up. That is an economic problem we cannot fix. Right now, we're driving down the highway with the accelerator on full, and I don't know a way around that. You know, the Federal Reserve doesn't know a way around it. They make general pronouncements about we're going to ease out of this, etc., grow out of it. But the truth is, look at the statistical data, look at the graph, and you make a judgment for yourself. The second graph we want to look at is the debt to GDP ratio. And the reason that's important is you just don't look at the national debt, which is astronomical in nominal numbers. You want to look at the amount of GDP or national income we have, the ability to pay that debt off in one sense. So you just don't want to look at a person's credit card in isolation. If they have $5,000 of credit card debt, if they're making $20,000 a year, that's a lot. But if they're making, $200,000 a year, then it's not as bad. So right now, the U.S. debt exceeds, or close to exceeds, depending on the measure, the total amount of income we have. So if you're making $20,000 a year, you're looking at a person who has $20,000 of credit card debt, and that's the U.S. economy, not me personally. So how do you feel about that? What do you think? The second thing you want to note about this graph is the trend is up. It's very difficult to pull back on spending. There is no way we are going to decrease our spending. I can tell you that right now. If we do, it would be a heroic effort. We have two components of spending, discretionary income and non-discretionary. Discretionary, the largest component, is the military. And that is a holy cow. Some people call it the cult of the military. There is no way we are going to cut that. And if we do, it will be incremental cuts. Non-discretionary spending is usually Social Security and Medicaid, and there's interest on the debt, things that we're obligated by law to fulfill. And I don't see a lot of people wanting to cut their Social Security, and let's say cranky old people, and you go up to them and say, politically, we're going to cut your Social Security and Medicaid. How do you think that flies? And the interest of the debt we're obligated for. So it looks like the spending is just going to accelerate, and the debt is just going to accelerate. If we were to ever go into a recession, our national income would go down and the debt to GDP would probably go up. We are into some hard times there. It would be analogous to somebody who has a $20,000 credit card debt and then their income goes to $15,000 a year. They've got to make normal payments. There's going to be a point where we can't even pay the interest on the debt. I mean, this is pretty objective. I mean, people aren't talking about it politically because it's a taboo topic. There's no solution. They don't have the solution. But don't worry, I have a solution. And then there's one more graph I want to take a look at, the trade balance. It's basically, if you see the trend again, it is just down. We're going to export and export less and less and import more and more in relative terms. So the ratio. It's a ratio of imports to exports. So right now, we're importing a lot more than we're exporting. This is not new news. You probably grew up with this news. Well, I didn't. There was a time when we always had a trade balance and everything was equal. Why is this bad? Think about your neighbor. What if he's just bringing and buying and consuming, but he's not really producing any income or exporting anything out? He's not producing anything. He's just accumulating things in his house. And what typically are Americans buying? Cheap Chinese things, plastic, consumable goods, clothes, things that don't have any real long-term value. It's not like we're bringing in a lot of capital goods. We are, actually, if you look at the numbers of import and exports. Perhaps I'm painting a little bit of a dark story, but to a large extent, we bring in a lot of apparel and food and consumables, things that are not adding to this investment long-term structure of the economy and improving us. We're just consuming. We're consuming it with our credit cards. The government's consuming it with its debt and spending. So we've got monetary policy, which is a very quick solution for any kind of recession. And we're against the wall because we've got almost zero bounds there. We've got a graph that is showing us that we've got the accelerator already on. We've got fiscal policy, which we've already spent. We've already blew the bank. We spent everything we had and we're deeply in debt. So there's not much more room there if we have another recession. And we've got a trade imbalance. And this doesn't look like it's going to auto-correct either. You know, there is a theory that we're reaching this new way and this new millennial of a higher growth region. That's because of acceleration in the internet, computers, AI, globalization. These things could push us, in a sense, to a new level of prosperity. But even that said, Greenspan pointed that out in 2003, and that was before the Great Recession. So maybe we have, but maybe we haven't. Maybe we could grow out of this. I don't want to just paint the darkest scenario ever, and we all should be preppers living off the grid in a post-apocalyptic world. It's not necessarily the case. I want you to be aware of the three dark clouds, the three structural cracks. These are not easy fix in this economy, and it will affect your life and the future of your life and your family. What's the solution? Well, there is a very simple solution, but nobody would buy it. It's something called the classic gold standard. Classic gold standard would basically eliminate the need, it would totally eliminate the need for the Federal Reserve, and interest rates would be determined by the supply and demand in the free market. Have we ever had this? Of course we have. We didn't have the Federal Reserve until 1913. And how effective has that Federal Reserve been? Let's take a historical perspective. 1787, if you had $1 US and traced it all the way to 1913, that $1 would be worth $1.06. 1913, if you take $1, what would it be worth in today's value? It would be worth 4 cents. So I don't think the Federal Reserve has done a very good job in preserving the value of the US dollar. And not only that, the Federal Reserve perhaps caused, I would say they did, the Great Depression, the dot-com bubble, the Great Recession, and a lot of other problems. So why are we trusting this Federal Reserve? Why not trust something like gold? Gold, if you look at Mises and Hayek, particularly Ludwig von Mises, he goes into what is money. And money is basically not something ordained from above, it's something we all universally agree on. And the Federal Reserve is a non-free market. It's a centralized, non-free market solution for a free market economy. I'm an American. I love the US. I want a free market and freedom. I do not want a monopoly of money. Now, how would that affect government spending if we had a gold standard? Basically, it's cutting up a credit card and replacing it with a debit card. Again, isn't that a pretty good solution? And with trade balances, we used to have a balance of trade until Richard Nixon eliminated Bretton Woods. That's the last remnants of what we had of a gold standard. And immediately you can see the trend on the graph. The imbalance continued all the way straight. Because when you have a gold standard and fixed exchange rates, you have a natural balancing mechanism. Gold has worked for thousands of years. Why did we depart from this and replace it with something what I call a PhD standard? PhDs who think they can steer and micromanage the economy. I'm getting a PhD in economics. And this is not necessarily a respected topic, the gold standard, but I'm specifically doing empirical research into monetary economics. It would solve the three cracks, the three dark clouds hanging over the US better than any politician, better than new changing of the political parties, or anything that you may hear on the news or coming out of Washington. It would simply start to auto-correct and bring us back to something called sound money. So these are the three dark clouds, the structural cracks over the US economy, and one solution for what we could do about it. Thank you very much. Please subscribe, comment below if you agree or disagree. And again, if you subscribe, I'll have a lot and you like this type of video, I'll have a lot of videos like this. Because I want to know. Economists do not necessarily have a crystal ball, but I want to know what the future will hold. And if I do this analysis, I think you'll have a pretty good picture. Thank you very much.